So we've seen using our error analysis on the trapezoid rule and seeing the result for Simpson's rule that in general the smaller you make h, the better it is for the accuracy of your result. Question is, how small should we make h? How many steps should we divide your interval of integration into? There is no fixed answer, depends on a case by case basis. So like we've discussed before, it's a trade-off between the runtime and the kind of accuracy that you want. But even with that, sometimes it can get tricky, especially if you don't know a priori what the function is going to be. So what I mean by that is, so you are writing some program which will integrate a function, and you are then going to give this program to a user, and that user can plug in whatever function they want to plug in and find the integral for that. So suppose in your program you have said, you are very generous, you have said 1 million points you're supposed to divide the interval into. So if I zoom in sufficiently, suppose these are your 1 million points, and you're going to evaluate the function at each of these points to get the integral. But now suppose there is some really weird pathological case where the function inputted by the user looks like this. Suppose this is the function that the user wants to integrate. So you're evaluating the function over here, over here, over here, over here, over here, here. And then you see what has happened is that you have completely missed out on the actual feature of the function, the peak. You're not seeing that. And that's possible. There could be some such weird function which has a sudden small sharp peak, and then you might just miss that out because of the way that you have chosen your steps. So that problem will always remain. So what you can do to prevent this kind of mishap is you can use what are called adaptive step sizes. Adaptive step size just means that you don't decide beforehand how many steps you're going to use. What this means is, again, suppose let's go back to trapezoid rule because that's easier to understand and to write down. Suppose first you decide to do trapezoid rule with 100 steps. And the answer you get from that, let's call it I100. Now you increase this. So now you do this with, let's say, 200 steps. And then you call this I200. And then you see how much your answer has changed. If the answer has not changed much between 100 and 200, if the difference is very small, negligibly small, then you say, okay, fine, this is good enough for me. But if you find that by taking extra points, your answer is changing substantially, it means that there are some features in your program, which in your integrand, that you have not taken care of. It means that there are some finer features in your program which you would not see if you just took a few steps. That's why when you took more steps, you saw more of these features. If you take even more steps, your answer will change even more because you're sampling more different features. So the more modulation or the more variation there is in your function, it will be better to take higher number of steps. So you take I100, I200, and maybe take 500 steps and check at each step how much your result is changing. And then once you find that your answer is not changing much anymore, then you can be satisfied and say, okay, this is what my final answer is. Of course, that is still no guarantee. Maybe at even much smaller length scales, you might come across even more features. But there's nothing you can do. This is about the best that you can do with this. So you always take IN, then you take I2N, I4N, something like that. So basically in your program, you will have now a loop also over the number of steps. So first you're doing it with 100, then you do it with 200 and so on. And then you put a condition saying that if IN and I2N, the difference is not much, then you stop running the program and you accept that as your final answer. So this is called using adaptive step sizes. You can also use adaptive step sizes now to eliminate some of the errors. So you know that in trapezoid rule, the final error that you get is of the order of h square. So let's say it is some k times h square. And when you do this adaptive step size, then from here again you get some different kind of error, but again that is also proportional to h square because essentially this has come from trapezoid rule. So let's call it some k prime h square. And then you can use these two. So okay, so when I say k h square plus some higher order thing, so h4. So now if you use the trapezoid rule and you use adaptive steps, the answers from both of these to eliminate h square, then what you will be left with is an error of the order of h to the 4. So you will have improved that even further. So we are not looking at this more in detail, but just to tell you that this kind of method is called Romberg integration. So you can use the formalism of the adaptive steps to eliminate the error from trapezoid rule. This error is of the order of h to the 4. Just to give you some information about this method. Now we saw in trapezoid rule, we tried to fit the function using straight lines. So we used a linear function to create a trapezoid. In Simpson's rule, we used a quadratic function. So this goes as x, this goes as x squared. But there's no reason to stop here, no? If you want, you can also take some quartic function. So x to the let's start with cubic. You can take a cubic function which goes as x cubed. You can take a quartic function which goes as x to the 4 and so on. So there's nothing stopping you. You can keep doing this kind of thing to get better and better fits to your answer, to your integral. So the generic term for all of these higher order ones, these are called Newton-Cotes formulae. And I'm sure if you look on the internet or if you find some advanced book, you'll find the actual formulae for all of these given to you. There are also other techniques for doing integration. There's something called Gaussian quadrature, which is used quite often, and I think Newman's book discusses it. So you can do that. There's something called Monte Carlo integration, which makes use of random numbers, and we will talk about that in lecture 3 or 4. Yeah. So we'll discuss this one technique for doing integration again over there as well. Now, so far we have always talked about what are called proper integrals. And by proper integrals, what I mean is that you have a nice function f of x which does not become infinite anywhere, and you are integrating always from a to b, where a and b are both finite numbers. Now, a and b being finite is very important because if one of them is infinity or minus infinity, then how are you going to define steps? You will need an infinite number of steps to go from A to B. So all of these formalisms that we've developed, they will not work. You necessarily need your limits to be finite. So this brings us to a discussion about improper integrals. So improper integrals is either where the function becomes infinite. For example, you might want to integrate 1 over x square dx between minus 1 and 1. 1 over x square. And you know that 1 over x square blows up at 0. Or you can have the limit becoming infinite. So for example, you might want to do 0 to infinity e to the minus x dx. Notice that in both these cases, the integral actually exists. So you can integrate 1 over x square from minus 1 to 1. The answer will be something like 1 over x from 1 to minus 1. I think 2 will, this will give you 2, this will give you e to the minus 0, which is 1. So in both these cases, it's a very well-defined integral. It's just that either the function becomes infinite or the limit becomes infinite. We are not talking about integrals which don't exist at all. Like for example, if you want to do integral 1 over x dx from 0 to infinity, this integral itself doesn't exist. Like if you try to evaluate it, it will blow up. So mathematically, this is not defined. So this is called an impossible integral. So we're not talking about impossible integrals. We're talking about integrals that are possible to evaluate, except that there is some infinity in the limits or in the function. So the most commonly used technique in this case is to use a change of variables. So first you do a change. So for example, so typically something like this works. So whenever you have an infinity in the limit, using this kind of change of variable will eventually allow you to write down your improper integral as a proper integral, and then you can use any of your normal techniques to solve it. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about over here in integration is multiple integrals. So if you have some function f of xy, so it's a function of two variables, and you want to integrate this over dx dy, there's nothing fancy, there's no new method to be learned over here. Very straightforward way. So let's say x goes from a to b and y goes from c to d. Then you, let's say between b and a, if you take nx steps, so then hx is b minus a over nx, and along the y direction you take ny steps, where hy is d minus c over ny, and then you do the exact same thing that you've been doing so far. So that concludes our discussion about integration. The last little bit that I want to talk about is numerical differentiation. And this doesn't really go much beyond what is the actual definition of a derivative itself. So if you remember, df by dx is defined as limit h going to 0, f of x plus h minus f of x divided by h. This is the basic definition of the derivative of f at x. What you're doing is you are finding the slope of the tangent to the curve f of x at this point at x. So the easiest way to do this is to use just the definition itself. So you say that df by dx is approximately just f of x plus h minus f of x divided by h. So if I take a small enough h, if I choose my h to be small, then you evaluate the function at the point x, you evaluate it at the function at the point x plus h, and then you can calculate the derivative like this. So this formula is called the forward difference formula. So you can also define something called a backward difference formula, and that is in a similar manner, except of going forward from x to x plus h, you go backward from x to x minus h. So these are the two ways that you can calculate. So let's take for example the forward difference formula and see what is the error in the calculation. So since you're saying that your df by dx that you have calculated is f of x plus h minus f of x divided by h, I can do Taylor expansion of f of x plus h. So this becomes f of x plus h times f prime x plus h square by 2 f double prime x plus blah 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 minus f of x divided by h. So f of x cancels out, and now one of the h's will also cancel out. So this becomes f prime of x plus h by 2 f double prime x plus blah blah blah. So this is the derivative that you calculated numerically, but this is the actual derivative itself. So the difference between these two gives you the error. So error is of the order of h itself. So once again, the smaller you make h, the more accurate your answer will be. But there's a problem over here. If you make h very, very small, then fx and fx plus h become very close to each other. And then there's a problem with the precision of your computer. Because your computer is storing data in these bits, there is a certain rounding of error that occurs. And that rounding of error will become significant when you're subtracting two numbers very close to each other. So then if you make, so initially as you decrease h, your error will improve as it will become smaller. If you decrease it even further, if you make it too small, so it becomes comparable to the machine precision, something like say 10 to the minus 16 or so, then you're in trouble because then you will get some meaningless answers. So one way to avoid that is to use not the forward or the background or the backward difference formula, but what is called the central difference formula. Central difference formula says that df by dx is, so you go forward a little bit, you go backward a little bit. So this has smaller rounding of error than the other two cases. Okay, so this was total derivatives. What about partial derivatives? So suppose I have some f of xy and I want to calculate partial derivative of this with respect to x. Same way, no problem, just treat your y as a constant. So this is going, so if I was to use the central difference formula, I would say f of x plus h by 2 and nothing happens to y, x minus h by 2, nothing happens to y, divided by h. Or if I wanted to take the partial derivative of this with respect to y, I would keep x untouched. So y would go to h plus 2, y would go to h minus h by 2 divided by h. So this is how you would do partial derivatives numerically. Okay, so this concludes the discussion that we wanted to have about numerical integration and numerical differentiation.